I work night shifts as an emergency room nurse. 4 nights ago, something happened that still baffles me. The hospital is old, with long, echoing hallways and flickering lights. I used to find comfort in it, but now I feel uneasy. It started with an empty bed in the ICU. I noticed it while passing through. It should have had a patient, but it didn't. The monitor beside it beeped softly, and I felt a strange pull towards it. It was faint but persistent. I shook it off and focused on my duties. I kept telling myself it meant nothing. Around midnight, I was at the nurse's station when one of the patients in room 3 began rambling. She talked about a woman in white who visited her at night. I thought she was just dreaming, but I couldn't shake the thought. As I entered room 5, the lights flickered and dimmed. My heart raced. I convinced myself it was just a malfunction. The next night, I returned to the ICU. The empty bed was occupied again. A new patient lay there, but he looked strange. He was unresponsive, and I couldn't recall seeing him arrive. I glanced at the monitor, which flickered and went quiet. It was like the air changed around me. I brushed it off as a busy night and filled out my paperwork. But that bed haunted me. Each night I came back, it filled with a new patient. Each one was unresponsive. Each one had no records. I began to hear whispers from the other nurses about a ghost in the hospital. They said she searched for lost souls. Another patient in room 7 shared a story about the woman in white. I felt chills run through me. It could be a shared hallucination from the stress of work, but something felt very wrong. The lights dimmed again that night as I walked past the ICU. My breath quickened, and I felt cold. I hurried back to the nurse's station, trying to shake it off. On the 4th night, I approached that dreaded bed once more. There was another patient in it. I felt sick. I asked the charge nurse about these patients, but he shrugged. I don't know, he said. They come and go. I couldn't understand. Who were they? Where did they come from? As I stood there, contemplating my sanity, I heard a voice whisper right next to me. Help me. I turned quickly, but nobody was there. I felt a cold sweat break out. What if those patients never really left? What if the woman in white was waiting for me? I took a step back, trying to breathe. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. I looked at the flickering monitor wondering if I was going crazy. But I knew one thing for sure, I wouldn't be able to sleep right again. The 5th night was different. I arrived at the hospital feeling an odd tension in the air. The lights flickered more than usual, as if the building itself was warning me. I tried to shake it off, thought about my patients, and dove into my shift. As I made my rounds, that empty bed in the ICU loomed in my mind. I hesitated before stepping into the room. Just as I gathered my courage, a loud crash reverberated down the hallway. I rushed toward the noise, my heart pounding. It turned out to be a cart of supplies that had toppled over. A couple of nurses nearby were laughing, but I couldn't find humor in it. There was an undercurrent of dread that I could not ignore. After that, I returned to the ICU. The bed was filled again. This time, a woman lay there, her pale skin almost glowing under the stark lights. I recognized her as patient 5 from last week. She had been in for surgery. The problem was, I remembered her as being stable, awake, and talking just days ago. I checked the monitor, but it flickered ominously before going dead once more. My skin prickled as I looked closer. I called for another nurse, hoping to get some clarity. This woman was admitted yesterday, right? I asked. She looked at the charts and frowned. No, she hasn't been registered, she said, her voice uncertain. I swallowed hard. I stepped back, overwhelmed by the sensation of something looming, watching. Then I saw movement. The woman's eyes were open. The stare pierced through me like ice. Help me, she murmured, almost inaudibly. My body froze. It felt like I was caught in a nightmare where I couldn't wake up. That whisper from the previous nights came roaring back. I attempted to check her vitals, but the equipment was silent. I wanted to look away, to run, but I felt tethered to the moment. Just then, the lights flickered and went out completely. Darkness engulfed the room, and I could hardly see my hand in front of my face. Panic surged as I reached for my flashlight, fumbling blindly. My mind raced with thoughts. Had I crossed into another realm? Were these patients in some kind of limbo? As I stood there, feeling completely lost, I heard the faintest rustle behind me. My heart raced again as I turned to face it. That's when I saw a shadow moving towards me. I couldn't tell if it was the darkness playing tricks or something real. I took a hesitant step back, and the flashlight flickered back to life. But instead of illuminating the way, it revealed a figure at the end of the ICU hall, a woman in white, standing still. Her long hair draped down her back, and her expression was unreadable. I felt an icy grip around my throat. Before I could say anything, before I could run, she whispered, "Come." The word was both a command and a plea. The air around me thickened, and I was paralyzed. What was she asking of me? I had to know, but dread clawed at my thoughts. I was trapped in that moment, caught between the living and the haunted. I stood frozen there, unsure of my next move. I finally found the strength to take a step forward, almost against my will. The woman in white didn't move, but there was an urgency in her posture. "Come," she repeated, this time with an edge that felt both inviting and threatening. I blinked, backing away slightly, but a force pulled me closer. The lights flickered again, casting disorienting shadows across the tiles. I turned to look back at the ICU room. The woman on the bed was still staring, her eyes wide, pleading. For a moment, their gaze felt merged with the figure in the hallway, as if they were connected in a way I couldn't comprehend. I hesitated, torn between two impossible choices. I couldn't abandon the patient who needed help, but the allure of the woman's call was difficult to resist. Doubt twisted in my stomach, churning with the dread that something was terribly wrong. Just then, my phone buzzed violently against my leg. I pulled it out, squinting against the dim light. A message from the emergency room flashed across the screen: "Need assistance. Immediate." A rush of adrenaline coursed through me. I had to choose. I glanced back at the figure. The woman's expression hardened, and a deep frown formed on her face. "You must come now," she insisted, her voice lowering to a whisper as if it were brushing against my ear. I turned fully, ready to sprint, when another loud thud echoed from the direction of the emergency room. Fear gripped my chest as I realized my duty. I could feel the pull of something lurking underneath the surface of everything happening around me. I dashed toward the ER, leaving the haunting woman behind. I couldn't shake how her eyes seemed to follow me, the weight of her gaze wrapping around me like a shroud. The hallways felt eerily silent. I could hardly hear my own footsteps, and the usual hospital noise was replaced by a soft hum that sent chills down my spine. As I entered the ER, I was met with chaos. Doctors and nurses moved with urgency, but there was a strange hesitation in their movements, as if they were aware of something I wasn't. "Where's the patient?" I shouted over the frenetic sounds. A nurse turned to me, eyes wide and panicked. She just came in. She wasn't breathing." My heart sank as I started to process the clues. Was it the same woman? In the ICU? I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. "Yes. They say she coded on the way here." The nurse replied, glancing back toward the resuscitation area, where frantic activity clashed with the dreadful stillness I felt creeping in. At that moment, another thud reverberated through the ER, and the overhead lights flickered violently. I turned to the door, heart pounding. Something was off, very off. I hesitated, torn again between my responsibilities and the gnawing feeling that the woman in white had drawn me into a web of unfathomable events. I could feel her presence at the back of my mind, urging me to understand. Then everything went dark. The lights failed completely, leaving us in a terrifying, claustrophobic silence. Panic surged, and I instinctively reached for my flashlight, but even that seemed to be swallowed by the void. "Someone's in here." I heard a voice shout, but I couldn't tell who it belonged to. My gut twisted again as I heard another thud, closer this time. Just as I was about to gather my thoughts, a cold draft swept through the ER, followed by a whisper. "Help me!" I felt the room shift, and a part of me knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. Not now. I stood frozen in the darkness, heart racing. The ER was now a void, a place where shadows danced and my thoughts raced to keep up. The whisper, chilling and thin, seemed to hang in the air. "Help me!" it echoed, drawing me in, demanding my attention like the woman in white had done not long ago. I pushed down the rising panic and concentrated on the sounds around me. The frantic chatter had dwindled to hushed tones. Was that fear in their voices? I took a tentative step forward into the unknown. The cold air brushed my skin, a ghostly reminder of whatever presence loomed near. "Everyone, check on your patients." A voice crackled through the radio static, urgency bleeding into the air. "Are they okay?" I managed to call out. Silence was my only answer. There was a sudden crash, shattering the stillness like glass, and I jumped. The thuds felt closer now, echoing through the darkness. I fumbled for my phone, desperate for any source of light. Just as I found it, the glowing screen drew my attention. A message flashed: "Get out. Now." My skin prickled. Before I could react, I heard footsteps behind me. I whipped around, my breath hitching as I struggled to discern shapes in the obscure light. Suddenly, a nurse bolted past me, her face pale with terror. "She's awake," she gasped, rushing towards the other end of the ER. Who was awake? My instincts screamed to follow, but the air felt thick, as if part of the hospital was holding its breath. I took a step and paused. Then, another whisper floated to me. "Help me!" I shook my head. It was a call to the woman in white, I was sure of it. But fear kept me planted. I didn't want to get lost again. Then, just as my heart began to settle, the lights flickered back on. But the sight that met me twisted my stomach. A bed lay overturned in the far corner, and behind it, the woman in white stood, her dress flowing like mist. Her arm was outstretched. She beckoned to me, her face painted with an eerie calm, but I felt something deeper, a hunger that entwined with the urge to run. "Help her!" the nurse shouted again, pointing toward another bed. A figure lay there, unresponsive, but a terrifying realization washed over me. The patient wasn't the woman in white, but someone else, perhaps the person I should have followed. I felt sick. I hesitated, caught between the pull of the spectral figure and the crisis at hand. Then, it clicked. I had to choose, the living or the one who wanted me to follow. With a sudden rush, I darted towards the hospital bed, my instincts driving me forward. The air felt charged, heavy with expectations. As I reached the bed, I met the eyes of the woman who had just coded, the same woman as before. But this time, her gaze locked into mine, and what I saw froze me in place. There was a realization within those eyes. She was not just a victim, she was part of something much darker. That's when I saw it. A shadow shifted behind her, creeping along the wall, its form unmistakably human but darkened, as if it had been pulled from the depths of someone's nightmare. And then it lunged. I barely had time to process the fear rising in my throat before the shadow lunged at me. My instincts kicked in, and I pivoted, dodging as it swept by like a dark gust of wind. I stumbled back, heart hammering in my chest. "Help!" I screamed, desperation lacing my voice. The nurse from before, the one who cried out about the patient, rushed in and grabbed my arm. "We need to get her stabilized." Her eyes darted to the shadow, now lost in the chaotic ebb of the ER. But the woman on the bed, her breathing was erratic, and I could see the wires tangled like vines around her limbs. As I looked at her face, I felt something, a pull, an urge to reach out despite the panic swirling around us. "We have to go," the nurse shouted, her grip tightening when she noticed my hesitation. "Now." That snapped me back. Fear for the living overrode the pull of the spectral figure. Together, we rushed towards the nurse's station. There were frantic voices all around us, screams mixing with cries for help. I could see the patients, some conscious, others still oblivious, terrifyingly unaware of the chaos erupting in the shadows. But my eyes were drawn back to the woman in white. She swayed gently, a dissonant rhythm in the storm that whipped through the ER. "There." I pointed at the bed. The nurse followed my gaze, her expression twisted in confusion and terror. "We can't just trust me," I shouted, then turned, ready to face whatever had lunged at me just moments before. Suddenly, the lights flickered again, and I felt a chill race down my spine. "This isn't happening," I muttered under my breath, my feet moving as if glued to the ground. The white-clad figure was still there, watching, waiting, but now the darkness around her seemed to pulse. "Why won't she just go?" I whispered, fear twisting my stomach. A loud thud echoed behind us, and I felt the air shift, thickening as if something were gathering strength. The nurse stumbled back, falling against a cart. Stray medical supplies clattered, breaking the tension but also drawing my attention to the open door at the end of the hallway. "I'm getting her out," I declared, a surge of adrenaline pushing me forward despite the threatening shadow lurking near the overturned bed. "Wait." But I couldn't. I took long strides, veering away from the shadow that watched me from the corner of my eye. When I reached the woman's bed, it felt like stepping straight into an icy pool. I grabbed her hand, squeezing it as if to reassure both of us. "I'm here," I panted. Her eyes seemed to flicker for a moment, connected and unfocused at the same time. Then I saw it again. The shadow surged forward, engulfed in a black mass, racing across the room. My heart raced as I glanced back at the nurse. "Get help." But as I blinked, the darkness twisted around the woman on the bed. I was left standing alone, caught between two worlds, the living and the dead, both seeking something from me that I didn't understand. Then the lights went out completely. I froze, the pitch blackness swallowing everything. I could barely hear the chaos around me, just the distant sound of panicked voices and the steady beeping of machines that punctured the silence. I instinctively tightened my grip around the woman's hand, desperate for a connection in the dark. "Stay close," the nurse's voice called out somewhere behind me. I could sense her moving, her footsteps echoing off the cold tiles, but I couldn't see anything. The hollowness pressed in on me, enveloping me with an oppressive weight. Then, out of nowhere, I felt a rush of air. It was cold, biting against my skin. I shivered, and a chill raced up my spine. That shadow was back. I could feel it swirling close, like an unseen storm gaining momentum. "What do you want?" I shouted, though I didn't truly expect an answer. There was no response, just a suffocating stillness wrapping around me. I squeezed the woman's hand tighter, willing her to respond, to tell me that everything would be okay. Then suddenly, the lights flickered back on, illuminating the room in an almost blinding brightness. I blinked, disoriented. The nurse was back, standing next to me, her face pale and drawn. "I couldn't find anyone," she exclaimed, her voice hurried. "The power's going out everywhere." She looked at the woman in the bed, her breath hitching in her throat. "We have to get her out now." If backup generators fail before she could finish, the woman's body convulsed violently, wires sparking as machines beeped erratically. I instinctively stepped back, even as I watched the woman's eyes snap open wide but with no clarity. "Help me," she gasped, her voice barely a whisper but filled with urgency. "Just hold on," I cried back, feeling a wave of nausea wash over me. I could see the shadow lurking in the corner, darker now, almost forming a shape. It was waiting, and I knew it was waiting for me. Now. The nurse shouted, her hands moving swiftly to the medical equipment. Let us get her on the stretcher. As we worked, my heart raced with fear. The shadow gathered strength, I could almost hear it whispering in the silence. I blinked again, but it didn't help clarify what was real. I could feel the woman's hand slipping from mine. Don't leave me. I cried out, panic leaking into my voice. I tried to pull her back towards me, but the shadow erupted forth. I watched in horror as its dark tendrils snaked closer, wrapping around the edges of the bed. Keep her stable, yelled the nurse, oblivious to the terror invading my senses. As it lurched forward, I searched for anything to fend it off. That's when I saw it, glinting in the harsh light. A small metal tray lay abandoned on the floor, tools scattered all around. Desperation sparked inside me. I lunged for it, grabbing a scalpel. It felt absurd to think it would protect me, but I wasn't ready to surrender yet. I turned to face the encroaching darkness as it closed in on us. We're not done, I shouted, raising the blade in defiance. But then everything shifted again. A heavy presence enveloped the room, and a voice deep and sibilant filled my ears. You cannot keep her. She belongs to me. The world around me blurred, and I realized this night was only beginning. I gripped the scalpel tightly, feeling the cold metal bite into my palm. My heart thundered in my chest. The shadow loomed closer, and I could see its form now, twisted and undefined, dark with hunger. It pulsed in the air, like a living thing. Get her out, I yelled at the nurse. She was focused, her hands moving with purpose, but I couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. I could see it, the shadow, creeping along the floor, tendrils reaching for the woman in bed. Just hold on, I reiterated, my voice rising. I could barely hear myself over the cacophony of alarms blaring, but I couldn't afford to be quiet now. Don't let go. As if hearing me, the woman's grip on my hand weakened. Panic surged through me. I could barely breathe as I watched her eyes dart around, searching for something just out of reach. We need to go now, the nurse insisted, wheeling the stretcher closer. I wanted to protest, to make her understand. It wasn't just a power outage or a failing machine. There was something sinister at play, and I couldn't let it take her. The light flickered again, dancing dangerously between us and the encroaching darkness. I raised the scalpel, feeling a surge of bravery, or maybe foolishness, coursing through me. Stay back, I shouted, hoping my voice would be enough to push the shadow away. I stepped in front of the bed, ready to defend her. The air thickened, and the shadow shrieked, a sound that clawed at my mind. Suddenly, the machines around the woman screamed louder, their alarms protesting against the growing stillness. Everything felt like it was happening in slow motion. The nurse grabbed the woman under her arms and started to lift. My instincts kicked in, and I joined her, still holding the scalpel. I couldn't let go, I wouldn't let go. Just as we got the woman onto the stretcher, the lights flickered again, dimming to a haunting hue. In that flicker, I glimpsed a figure standing in the doorway, half hidden in shadow. My breath caught in my throat. Stop, I called out, my voice shaky. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, silent, watching. I could feel the pull of that darkness intensifying at my back, and I knew we didn't have much time. Go, the nurse urged, struggling to keep the stretcher steady as we wheeled it away. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the figure in the doorway held the answers to whatever nightmare was unfolding. With a last glance, I tore my eyes away solely to feel the shadow gain ground behind us. I could hear its whispers more insistent now. You cannot save her. The nurse and I frantically pushed the stretcher out into the corridor. The air felt different here, heavy. I could hear the faint sounds of chaos beyond this part of the building. Where are the others? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. They should have been here already, she shouted back, panic threading her words. But before she could say more, my gaze caught something glittering on the floor. A small, broken piece of glass. That's when I knew. The shadow, the whispers, the figure I was being hunted. I just didn't know why yet. And then, from down the hall, a chilling laughter echoed. I felt the blood drain from my face. "We're not safe here," I gasped, my heart racing once again. The shift from uncertainty to fear gripped me. I looked back at the woman on the stretcher, the shadow still flowing behind her, and I realized this was only the beginning of our terror. I pushed the stretcher forward, the woman trembling under the thin sheets, her face pale. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly glow. I glanced behind me, expecting to see the shadow still lurking close, but it was gone. Just as quickly, the laughter echoed again, louder this time, wrapping around us like a cold blanket. "We have to get to the exit," I shouted, my voice cracking as I turned back to focus ahead. The nurse nodded, her eyes wide with fear, desperately trying to maintain control. We passed other rooms, some with doors ajar, others completely dark. I caught glimpses of movement in the shadows. Was there anyone else in those rooms, or were they just more remnants of fear? "It's too quiet," I muttered under my breath. Just seconds ago, the alarms were blaring, urgency flooding the halls. Now it felt like a stillness before a storm, foreboding and heavy. "We need to move," the nurse urged, grunting as she adjusted the weight of the stretcher. Her determination steadied me, but I couldn't escape the dread crawling up my spine. I tightened my grip on the scalpel, its coolness a reassuring presence in my palm. Then, from somewhere off to my right, I caught a flicker of motion. I turned, instinctively raising the scalpel. A nurse stumbled into view, her scrubs smeared with something dark. She was panting, a look of terror coloring her features. "Help!" she gasped, eyes darting behind her. But her sentence was cut short by a deafening crash, the sound echoing along the corridor. My heart nearly stopped. We locked eyes, and I saw the panic mirrored in her face. "What happened?" I shouted, stepping toward her, but she flinched back. There was something primal in that fear, a warning that sent chills racing through me. "Get out! Now!" she screamed, and suddenly she was gone, rushing back down the hall. I didn't know what she'd seen, but I could feel it too, an impending dread. "Go after her!" I yelled to the nurse at my side, but she hesitated. "We can't leave her." "Leave her?" the nurse echoed incredulously. "We can't save anyone if we stay here." I opened my mouth to argue, but then the laughter returned, now closer, and I felt my resolve start to fracture. "We have to keep moving," I said, turning my back on the shadow of uncertainty creeping in. Just as we started forward again, the lights flickered violently, plunging us into darkness. I stumbled, my senses overwhelmed. I could hear the sound of something skittering across the floor, too fast to be human. "We can't stop now, let us go," I insisted, pushing the stretcher ahead with renewed urgency. I reached for the wall, trying to steady myself, but then I came face to face with something unexpected. It was that figure from the doorway, the one I had seen before. It stood there, its eyes gleaming like the surface of a knife. It grinned, an unnaturally wide smile that didn't fit with the dimness surrounding us. My breath hitched as the darkness shifted and opened, revealing an endless void behind it. "Help them," it whispered, its voice dripping with malice. "You cannot run forever." I swayed back, adrenaline flooding my veins. "No!" I shouted, swinging the scalpel wildly, desperate to defend myself. My heart raced as I felt the pull of the void at my back. "Keep moving!" I yelled again, shoving the stretcher onward as the laughter erupted once more, twisting and echoing around us. I didn't know what it was or why it was here, but all I knew was that we weren't alone anymore. "Who are you?" I managed to call out, fear sharpening my voice as I pushed forward against the overwhelming terror. But before there was any response, the lights blinked back to life, illuminating the corridor once more. And then everything felt eerily quiet. The figure was gone, along with the laughter. But deep down, I sensed that this was far from over. I pushed forward, breathing heavily as my heart still thudded in my chest. The nurse followed, her grip on the stretcher tightening as we maneuvered through the narrow hallway. "We need to find a door, any door," she said, glancing nervously down the empty corridor. I nodded, my eyes scanning desperately for an escape. The sterile tiles underfoot felt cold and unwelcoming. Yet the eerie silence magnified every noise: my own breath, the soft creaking of the stretcher, and the faint sound of distant footsteps that couldn't be placed. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, stopping abruptly. The nurse halted beside me, her eyes wide, filled with uncertainty. "Hear what?" she asked, inching closer. "There's nothing here. Just us." "No, there's something," I insisted, peering into the shadows that hugged the corners of the corridor. The air felt thick as if something was lurking just out of sight. Then, without warning, a door flew open at the far end. A figure stumbled out, disheveled and frantic. It was another nurse, blood dripping from her hands, her scrub stained beyond recognition. I felt bile rise in my throat. "Help!" she screamed, her voice breaking. "They're coming. They're everywhere. Get back inside." I shouted, stepping forward, but she was past us before I could take another breath. I exchanged a glance with the other nurse. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice trembling. "That way." I pointed down the hallway, where the chaos erupted. "We have to reach the exit. Now." We resumed our frantic pace, the sounds of our hurried breaths punctuated by the panicked cries echoing from the open door. As we ran, I felt a shiver run down my spine, the sensation that we were being watched. Each step drew us closer to the exit, but the laughter returned, swirling around us again like an invisible specter. "What is happening?" I gasped, the confusion and dread starting to swell inside me. As we turned another corner, I froze. A circle of nurses clustered together, faces pale but eyes wide and alert. They were crouched over something on the floor. "Move!" I shouted, but my voice was swallowed by the laughter now echoing right in front of us. Before we could turn back, one of the nurses looked up, terror etched on her features. "You have to get out. They're not who you think they are." "What do you mean?" I shouted, but just then, something shifted in the shadows behind her. A figure tall and distorted loomed at the end of the hallway. "Run!" I yelled. We didn't hesitate. We dashed toward the exit, but the door was only several paces away. Desperation fueled my legs. Just as we reached it, the lights flickered again, and everything went dark. The laughter crescendoed, and I felt the ground beneath me begin to tremble. "Get it open!" I yelled at the nurse, my voice teetering on panic. Suddenly, the temperature dropped. I could see our breath rising in small clouds. The nurse was fumbling at the doorknob, her hands shaking. "It won't budge," she cried in frustration. I spun around, ready to confront whatever was behind us. That's when I saw it. In the darkness, two glowing eyes stared back at me, locked in a sinister gaze. The echo of laughter morphed into a sinister whisper. "You cannot leave. You are part of the game now." I slammed my shoulder against the door, adrenaline surging through me. And just like that, a new determination ignited inside me. I would refuse to be a pawn in whatever twisted game this was. With a feral scream, I hurled myself against the door again, bracing myself for anything on the other side. The darkness throbbed, a living thing, heavy with the weight of unseen threats. The air felt soaked in fear, and the whispers surged, clawing at the edges of my sanity. "Get ready!" I shouted to the nurse beside me. I could hear her labored breath, echoing my own panic. I felt the pulse of the room inviting danger, daring me to succumb. "On 3." I counted, my palms slick with sweat, knees shaking with exertion. 1, 2, 3. With one last desperate heave, I lunged forward. This time, the door cracked open just a sliver but enough for the blinding white light to flood into the hallway. Go, go. I urged, pushing through the opening, pulling the nurse behind me. The glow enveloped us, while the darkness receded, hissing like steam. We stumbled forward into the emergency exit, hearts racing with the thrill of escape. But as we burst through, the laughter grew louder, ringing in my ears, an echo that engulfed my soul. I didn't stop to think, adrenaline propelled us forward towards the stairwell. The metallic scent of fear hung in the air like a warning. Racing down the steps, my heart thundered against my rib cage. I could feel the presence behind us like a gust of wind, felt the shadow pulse in time with every hasty step. Each ascent brought promises of safety, but the dread trickling behind us was unrelenting. Wait! The nurse called, suddenly halting mid-step. I glanced back, breathless, only to see her staring back up the stairwell, confusion etched on her face. "What's wrong?" I asked, but my heart raced as realization dawned. I could sense it, too, an undeniable familiarity in the atmosphere. It's calling me," she murmured, her voice distant. I felt panic swell within me, twisting like a knife. "No. We need to go," I cried, yanking her arm. But she shut her eyes, breathing deeply as if caught in some trance. "Help them," she murmured, tilting her head slightly. I reached out, grasping her shoulder, but all I could see was the swirling darkness approaching from above. "Don't!" I screamed, shaking her fiercely. With a jolt, her eyes snapped open, filled with a confusion that mirrored my own. "Run!" I urged again, and without a word, we dove forward. Suddenly, the world split in two, the dim light ahead flickered on and off, giving way to the shifting shadows behind. The exit door resisted as I fumbled with the handle, fighting against dread clawing at my heels. The shadow glimmered closer, still just beyond reach, but its desperate voice clawed deeper. "Come back," it whispered. "Now," I urged. "Push." This time, we barreled through together, crashing into the outside world. I felt relief wash over me, the cool night air, filled with the scent of rain-soaked grass and freedom. But it was short-lived. The swirling darkness didn't weaken, it loomed just outside the doorway, as if we had merely inverted the threshold. "What do we do?" The nurse breathed, panic settling in the once freedom around us. I looked to our right, the parking lot now threatened by rain clouds brewing overhead. Everything around us felt disjointed, the sounds of the hospital faded yet echoed endlessly. "Where's everyone?" I asked. Shadows danced beneath the swaying lamps, revealing nothing but deserted cars. "Let us go," she said, moving towards the vehicle, urged by an instinct I couldn't quite grasp. She fumbled for her keys. I felt that dark presence still clawing beneath my skin, making me second-guess every move. Then I felt it, an unwavering tugging sensation at my side, like the grasp of cold fingers gripping bundled memories. "What if this is just the beginning?" I murmured, dread knitting into my gut. The night still held its secrets, shrouded in indiscernible shapes, taunting visions lurking just at the edge of my gaze. "Just drive," she urged, hyperventilating now. I jumped into the passenger seat, my body still electrified from escapism yet heavy with uncertainty. The shadows flickered in the car's rearview mirror, curling impossibly towards us. I squeezed my eyes shut and turned my face away. But even as we backed out of the lot, my mind raced through the possibilities. The laughter, a sound imbued with sinister promise. Would it ever relent? What had we unleashed by stepping foot into that haunted realm? As we pulled away, I could glimpse reflections in the mirror, an endless swirl of white gowns and ashen faces, pleading with wide eyes that faded as the distance increased. "I don't understand," she hissed, glancing at me frantically. "Do you think we'll ever be free?" For a moment, I couldn't answer. I couldn't tell if it was our escape or a mere taste of the wrapping jaws of the unknown. The woman in white danced in the fringes of my mind, lingering shadows whispering promises of reclaiming lost souls. In the haunting silence, I finally spoke, my voice quiet yet heavy, "We can't know for sure." And in that ambiguity, the road stretched infinite before us, lined with fleeting doubts. I couldn't shake the lingering sensation that the deeper answers were waiting, just concealed by layers of darkness. I felt that fretting pull, inching closer, far away yet undeniably near, reminding me that I may have merely stumbled into a greater enigma than I could ever fathom. As we drove away, the fear clung steadfastly, haunting my thoughts that wandered into the confines of the night.